Let's continue building our 3D avatar builder. In this episode, we will assemble body elements and clothes to build the first version of our 3D model. This is our Blender file. You can see on the right, it is composed of different parts to create a character. And this is exactly what we will reproduce in our project. We will use all the exported part, for example, this here, I can switch to this one, and we will compose using those assets to create our avatar because we want to be able to animate them. You can see that there is the armature here containing all the different bones to animate the different parts of our character. We are using a Mixamo compatible rig. So for all those characters, the same animations you can find on Mixamo can be played seamlessly. So if I change my character to this animation, it will nicely work. For example, here we have a huge belly, so maybe I would increase a bit the character arm space, but you can see that it is working. If we switch from rest position to pose position, so following an animation, you can see that the different assets are going into the right part. This is because our mesh are weight painting. What it means is a bone will have an impact on the different faces of our object. If we look at the arm, you can see the color change where the bone has an impact. As Gearsource is providing us the assets, you won't have to worry about weight painting for now. It's just for you to understand when we will use this, how it is working under the hood. And later we will learn how to create our assets and do the automatic weight paint to follow the different bones animations. Something important to know is that for the top, we include the hands, and for example, for the bottom, we also include the part of the legs that is visible. If I remove the bottom here, you don't have legs anymore. I would need to enable the base body so you can see it. You might wonder why we do this. So if I hide base body and I will put back the bottom too, if we look in wireframe mode, you can see that we only have faces that are visible. We don't have the body under our bottom. This will prevent for some animation to have the skin that overflows our clothes. It might happen even if you do perfect weight painting because the faces of the bottom and the base body are not exactly the same, so they could collide. But overall, it's a great optimization because it reduces the number of faces, especially invisible ones. I will provide you the zip folder, including each part exported separately in a GLB file. Those parts we will need to go to customization assets and to upload them. So we can delete the fake one we created first, add a new record, choose the group. We'll start by the first ones, the head. The name, you can name it head 01. And for the thumbnail, as we will see later how to create beautiful thumbnail when we will create our asset, for now I will use a simple version using the previewer from a 3E extension to be able to preview GLB file. I will just zoom in, position myself correctly and take a screenshot and not do it for each asset for the moment. Let's choose head, open, and URL, it's our file. So as we are on head 1, we need to find it, head 1 and open, then create. Before I speedrun the process, let me show you a way to go faster. So you could do new record and search for the group every time. So what you can do instead is click on the existing one on the top right, duplicate and start from there. All right, I will speedrun it. Okay, I'm finally done. I didn't import everything, but we have a good base to start with. Let's try to reload our project. And now we should see the different assets. So we have 4 different heads, even if it's the same thumbnail, it's different models. Then we have the hair, but you can see we have an issue when it's loading. It's displaying the previous one and then the new picture. I think it's because the key we are using is the index, and it's the same when we change category. Instead, we can use the thumbnail so we are sure it's a new component. And we don't need the index anymore. Okay, so now if we change category, it's working fine. It's loading new thumbnails. It's not good looking yet, but we will focus on that later. For now, what we want is in the middle to display a 3D avatar. If we are using the online version of GLTFExporter with the exported armature, which contains only the armature, here it is. You can see it's containing a group with a base rotation and scale on the armature and a skin mesh. What I did to be sure that it exports the armature and the skin mesh was to create a very little plane that is invisible on the right. We won't use it, but at least it allowed me to export a GLB file including the armature. This will be our base to add our different assets on that. Let's copy it and let's create a new component. Inside components, we will name it avatar.jsx. Inside, we create our component and we paste what we just got from GLTFExporter. First of all, we don't have the armature here, so let's put it, we won't put it remotely, we will put it on our project models and put the armature here. You can see nothing is visible inside. So the path is models/armature. Then we won't be using animations for now. We can get rid of it. And the materials, they will come from the different assets. So we don't need it either. We only need the nodes, including the main armature with its bones. We can simply get rid of the skinned mesh. We will create ours with our assets, but this invisible plane is meaningless. But we definitely need this one that contains all the bones. If we look at it, console.log nodes, let's prepare a component that will host all our 3D components. Let's name it experience.jsx, experience. And inside, for now, we will return our avatar component. And inside the app, instead of all of this, we will return the experience. And we can move in experience the orbit control and get rid of the mesh. If we open it, we have a lot of errors. This is because in Avatar, I forgot to do all the different imports. Let's do it. We have another one about the props because our avatar need to take some props so we can positionate the group. Fine, we don't have errors anymore related to this. And in the nodes, you can see we have all the different bones. Now, what we want to do is when we click on an asset, it will select it and display it in our scene. To do this, we need to prepare the different methods in our store. First, we will create a new object, which will be named customization. And it will be an object and the different keys will be the category name. For example, hair, it will contain an object with different things, same for the top, etc. But we won't feed it manually. Instead, when we loop for each categories, we will set customization of category.name will be equal to an empty object. But we don't have access to this one, so we'll assign it with a new one because we do it only once. So it will be an empty object, we assign it, and then we set it into our store. Now, to be able to update the customization, we create a method, change asset, taking the category we want to update and the new asset. So what we do is we set the state and we update our customization object with the previous value it has. And for the designated category, we copy the previous values and we set the asset. Now, let's implement it in our UI. So use configurator store. Here we have it. We can get our change asset method and on the button that is responsible for the assets. So this one, we will add an onClick method. OnClick, we call change asset with current category.name and the asset we are on. We can also add some extra styling. So if we are on the current asset, what we do is we add a border. And if we are not, we don't. And we also set the opacity to 80%. To be able to do this check, let's not forget to add customization from the values we get from our store. Let's try it. If we can see the border, it seems not. We are comparing the IDs, but it's .asset.id. Okay, so now we have nothing. And when we click on an asset, it becomes the current one. Let's try it with the hair. Perfect. And if we come back, you can see the right one is selected. It took time, but now we are ready to render our avatar using the values we will get from the customization. Let's do it. Inside components, we will create one that is named asset. It will be the asset that we load from the GLB file from our Pocket-based instance. Export const asset is equal to, the parameter we will need is the URL of the file, but also the skeleton to attach it to our skinned mesh. Then once we have it, we'll get const sin is equal use GLTF from the URL. Now let's see what we need inside our React component. If we drag and drop one of our component into GLTF.JSX, we have the nice preview of the shoes. And you can see it's composed of two meshes, but it's not skin meshes because individually the 3D asset doesn't know that its parent will be an armature with bones. But inside we still have the data of our weight painting to follow the different bones. But for it to happen and to follow our skeleton, we need to be sure to use skinned meshes and not only mesh. To know how to create one declaratively using Three.js, you can check the documentation of skinned meshes. But the important thing to know is that you need a geometry, some materials to create a skin mesh, like when you create a mesh, but then you will need a skeleton to attach it to your skinned mesh, which is done here, mesh.bind skeleton. As we are using React 3 Fiber, it's easier, we don't have the binding manually. We will need to declare a skin mesh to attach it to the skeleton that we will pass as a parameter. And then we need the geometry and the material. The thing is, we can't use GLTF.JSX and just copy paste the values because each models are different. And you can see on this example, we have two different meshes using different materials. So to get access to those meshes, what we will do is iterate through the scene that we get from use.gltf. We only want to do it once, so we are using a use memo and we will name it attached items. We do it only once when the scene changes and we will return an array of items. So we iterate through our scene with traverse, and for each child of our scene, we'll check if it is a mesh. So remember, we'll have the first one and then the second one. When we have this, we will push into our array of items the geometry of that mesh and its material. It will loop through all the items, and in the end, we will return it. Instead of returning a manually created skin mesh, we will loop through all our meshes and create all the skinned meshes that we require. We have all the data now. So we have the key, which will be using the index, the geometry, the material, and then we bind the skeleton. We can also add cast and receive shadow for a better look when we will add some lights. Perfect, our asset component should be ready. We can add it inside our avatar. We can get rid of the console log. First, we need to get the customization from our store. So we get only state.customization. So only when customization change, it will re-render that component, not when one of the other variable will change. Now we can loop through all our keys of the customization object. So it's for each category. We will map it. And if we have a URL and an asset, then we'll be using suspend to load our component asynchronously. And we will render our asset component. The URL we do like we did for the thumbnail to get the absolute path. And for the skeleton, we are using nodes.plain.skeleton. Don't forget to do the different imports. And let's try it. We can select a head, but it's entirely black because I didn't add any light so far. Let's just try other assets. We can see the hair change, Let's add a top, select the first one, here it is. But to be able to visualize it, let's stage a bit our scene. Let's change the background color and add some fog. And let's lower our experience so it's centered on the screen. We'll just do it manually without the center component. We can use a different starting camera position with -1, 1, and 5. And also change the field of view to 45. Better like this. Okay. And then let's spice things inside our experience. To add a global lighting, we can use an environment component from Dry library. You can adjust the intensity. I chose a low one because we want our direct lights to have the more impact. For the lighting setup, I will be doing something like a YouTube setup with a 3-point light, which means you will have one main light in front of you, which will be the key light, and it will be the one responsible to cast shadows. To have the perfect resolution for the shadows, I'm using a map size of 2048. I adjust the shadow bias, and then we'll have a fill light coming from the side with a lower intensity. So we still have the whole face brightened. And then to make things more exciting, I will add 2 backlights, one in the left and one in the right. One will be red and the other one will be blue. Now we can see our avatar. We have nice lighting. Maybe we should add eyes because it's a bit scary. But we don't have shadows because we need to add a floor. And we can go behind our avatar, which looks very bad because of our strong lights coming from behind. To look like a photo studio, we'll be using the backdrop component. So we'll have a floor and something like a plane, curved plane going back through our back. Let's add it right here. Looking way better. We still don't have shadows because we need to enable them. But just before, let's lock the camera. We never want to see this. On our orbit controls, which is responsible of animating our camera when we move it, we can limit the vertical angle and horizontal angle. Now it is restricted only to almost good positions. And then on our canvas, we need to add shadows. But to be able to see it, we need to reload. And the bad part about reloading is we need to set up our avatar again. But look, it's starting to look very nice. If you look at the lighting, the setup, it's quite nice. Maybe the shadows are a bit too strong here. Inside our experience, where we set up our lights, we can use the soft shadow component with a size of 52 and 16 samples. Be careful, the more you use, the more resource intensive it gets. Now our shadows look very nice. Let's add some eyes, but it's a bit a pain because every time we reload, we don't want to set up a character from scratch. We want to start from something. What we can do is inside our fetch categories, when we assign the assets, here we could take always the first asset. But if we do this, it's not very configurable. And we have a database where we can configure things, so let's leverage it. Inside our customization groups, we will edit it to add a new field. We want it to be a relation. It will be starting asset. It will be a customization asset, and it will be a link to one of the assets. So we want the relation to be single. We can save. We don't need to put one for each category, but for the most important. So for the head, we can take the first head. You save the changes and you do the same for the one that would require a starting asset. And you have the choice. You are not obligated to choose the first one. Let's take this one. And then we don't have faces yet. And the eyes, I will choose those ones. And then eyebrows, maybe you don't want eyebrows, so it's up to you. Set selection, a nose. So the facial parts, there are a lot. Then the body is faster. Glasses, no. So hat glasses, you wouldn't put a default value. It's accessories you put later. The top, let's take the second one. The bottom, let's take the first one and let's get some shoes. Save changes, perfect. And now inside our store, when we loop through all categories, what we do is if we have a starting asset, then on our current customization object, for the asset, it will be equal to one assets from our category if we find it. So we compare that the asset ID is equal to the starting asset. Let's reload and we can see it's working well. Every part is loaded, but one of our assets has a problem for now. So is it the head? Doesn't seem to be. So it might be one of the hair. Yeah, it is. Oh, lovely haircut. So for now, we will keep it, but we will just don't make it the first asset. Maybe this one or this one. We simply go back to Pocket Base and change the starting asset for the hair. Let's take the, was it the 3? Let's reload. And yes, perfect. Now, so far, our avatar is in T-pose. So we are using skin mesh, but we didn't test that an animation will work and won't break everything. So let's load one and try it. I have prepared you an animation. So for the moment, we'll be using this one. Later, we will be using different animations. But for now, it's just an idle animation in FBX, which is not ideal. We should compress it to GLB, but it's for demonstration purpose only right now. So in avatar, we will get the animation from our FBX file. Don't forget the import. Then to get our actions, we need to use animations hook using our animations array, which we get from the FBX file, and the group, the container, which is declared here. And then in a use effect, when the actions change, we will do actions of, and by default the name is mixamo.com, not ideal, but we will change animations later. .play. Now if you look, our avatar is now playing the idle animation and is not in T-pose anymore. And last thing before diving into the customization of the different assets will be to make this download button on the top right to work. And thanks to Threejs, it's very easy to do. What we will want is when we press the download button, which is located in the UI somewhere, download here, it will call a download function that is accessible in the avatar, because it is here that we have access to all the 3D data that we need to generate our GLB file. So to do this easily, to do this connection, we will do it in the store. We will create a download function. By default, it will be a function that does nothing. And we will create a method, setDownload, to assign a new download method. So it will take a new function and it will assign it to replace this void function. In our avatar now, we can get access to the setDownload function. So it is meant to assign the download function. And then in a use effect, we will create that download function. So only when the component is mounted. Let's create our download function. And inside, what we will need to do is to use the GLTFExporter. It's a component from Threejs to export your scene into a GLTF file. Refer to the documentation. No one will ask you to know it by heart. So you will do exporter.parse with your current group. So again, it's the same container that contains all our avatar. Because if you don't hit at the right scope, you could export the whole scene with the light. And here it's not what we want. We only want our avatar. Then it will take a function when it works. We will call a save function that will save the blob result into a file. And we will name it avatar underscore the timestamp.glb. You can name it differently. And if there is an error, we will just log into the console something happened. And very important, set binary to true. Don't forget to do the import for GLTFExporter. But by default, it's located in 3 library. You might have issues by doing that. Instead, in your terminal, run yarn add 3 stdlib. So you will have a simpler import, yarn dev, and import it from stdlib. Then let's make our save function we call with the result. So we take the blob and the file name. For this, we will need a link. You can see it's the old school JavaScript way to download a file. It's From Stack Overflow, I even kept the comment, then link.href create object URL with the blob we got from the exporter, then .download will be the file name, and we will click on the link. Now our download method is ready. We just need to set download to download. So the method will be available anywhere inside our project. Now inside our UI, we have our download button. Const download is equal to use configurator store of download. And on click, we can call download. Now let's try it. On the top right, download. You can see it's downloading the file. Let's try a second time with different assets. I will change my head. We have a different head shape here. Maybe another haircut, looking nice. Changing the nose, maybe the clothes. This one is a bit girly and conflicting with the bottom, so we'll check with another one for now. Okay, long sleeves and bottom, let's change it. And we have a lovely short. Perfect. Let's download this version. Now let's try them. Let's drag and drop just to preview it. I will do the same with the other one, but on the side here. And you can see we have the two versions. We can use textured to have a better lighting setup. But you can see we have ready to use avatars. Thank you for watching. In the next video, we'll see how to change the colors of our assets dynamically. To continue the journey with me and build your own 3D avatar configurator, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified when the next part is released. See you in the next video.